Well, the Prime Minister has also used her speech tonight to link underinvestment in electricity infrastructure to power price rises. She says the uncertainty is making her determined to put a price on carbon. For its part, the industry says the big increases are largely due to the upgrading of power lines and wires. And there are predictions that in some states there's worse to come. New South Wales residents, for instance, will have to foot $1 billion bill to pay for the state's solar rebate scheme. Hamish Fitzsimmons reports.
Like many families, Maria Caven and her husband budget for bills. So when they took their 5 children on a long holiday over winter, they prepaid their electricity bill, or at least that's what they thought they'd done.
I anticipated the bill being $400, and when I got back, the bill had come in and the bill was more than double what I'd anticipated, so it was over $800.
Today, the Australian Bureau of Statistics released figures which showed businesses paid almost 9% more for commodities like electricity in the last quarter. Prices for households have risen between 6 and 18% nationally in the last year.
Having an $850 bill I've never had before, so, having to pay that, it's had to put it on credit, really, to put it as best we can, manage it and maybe pay that bill off, with that extended time.
The power industry says overdue upgrading of ageing infrastructure is largely to blame for the price rises.
We're seeing that our electricity networks, the poles and wires that bring the power to your house, are in many cases 50 years old and they're needing to be replaced.
In New South Wales and Queensland, electricity remains in government hands, and recent decisions by price regulators there have rubber-stamped increases to pay for network upgrades. In privatised Victoria, the owners of the grid are still arguing about how much their works will cost.
Certainly Victorians will be facing price rises. Not price rises, though, of the magnitude that we are going to see here in New South Wales or indeed in Queensland.
Price rises in New South Wales will have an added piquancy. Under the solar bonus scheme in New South Wales, people with solar voltaic panels on their roofs are paid 60 cents per kilowatt hour to feed into the grid, regardless of what energy they're consuming. In other states, the electricity generated is offset against what is consumed. Since it began in January, take-up for the New South Wales feed-in tariff scheme has far outstripped expectations.
We understand that they were going to review the scheme when 50 megawatts of solar photovoltaics were installed. Now, that's a lot of solar PVs. That's a lot of roofs. Anecdotally, there's probably in excess of 110 megawatts on the system now, so it's been hugely successful. But it comes at a price.
The power industry and the state opposition estimate the scheme has blown out and will cost $1 billion by July next year.
This is a massive spend up on the credit card to be paid by a future government, and it is frightening how out of control things are allowed to be. As long as they're not going to be reported to taxpayers before the March election, anything goes.
The New South Wales government declined to be interviewed, but it's accepted the solar bonus scheme is a looming issue and it's being reviewed earlier than expected. But the rate and 7-year term of the scheme is locked in by legislation.
People in the industry are likening it to the insulation scheme, but I think this is worse because the government doesn't seem able to stop it.
The peak body for renewable energy says critics of the New South Wales scheme forget that it's building power capacity in a market that desperately needs it.
With these solar PV schemes, we're seeing new power stations being built, peak load power stations that run on clean energy. Now, the cost of those power stations, like other power stations, is normally borne by consumers, but in this case, it's being co-funded partly by the householder and partly by the rest of the market.
But even those in the renewable industry believe the New South Wales scheme favours those who install solar panels.
We think that the scheme is good in construct, but probably a bit over-generous and favours too heavily the householder. We think they can and should pay perhaps a bit more and easing the burden on consumers and by turning down the feed-in tariff being provided.
And there's another potential price hike on the horizon. While it's accepted within the power industry that an ETS or carbon tax will contribute to price rises, many think it will also end the current uncertainty about future investment in baseload power generation.
Uncertainty will certainly play a part in volatility in the electricity market and will ultimately lead to bills going up. So really the sooner there is a carbon scheme legislated and a price that boards and companies can work with, the better from the point of view of the consumer.
That's cold comfort to householders already struggling with ongoing price rises.
We really would have to, do our homework properly and not turn that radiator on rather than put a jumper on or something. It's going to be a struggle.
Hamish Fitzsimmons, Late Line.